Good evening, and welcome to History for Your Sleep. You're safe here, and you can let your mind settle for a moment. Take a slow, comfortable breath and allow the day to loosen its weight around you. If these calm journeys bring you peace, you may subscribe whenever it feels right, quietly, naturally, without any hurry at all. Now, a gentle story begins. Tonight, we step into ancient India, a land of wide rivers and fertile plains, dusty roads winding between villages, temples rising through warm evening air, and quiet footsteps moving beneath star-lit skies. A place where daily life followed the rhythm of seasons and rituals, where markets, homes, and fields shared the same slow pulse, and where ordinary routines unfolded in small, steady patterns, from sunrise to the calm hours of night. Let us wander there, slowly, softly, and let ancient India surround us in the gentle stillness of the night. Morning in ancient India did not begin with urgency. It began with light. The sun rose quickly, warming the land before people were fully awake. Heat arrived early, and with it came movement. Birds stirred near the riverbanks. Insects hummed in the grass. Water reflected the sky in slow, wide currents. Rivers were not scenery here. They were life. Most people lived close to them, not by choice, but by necessity. The Indus, the Ganges, countless smaller rivers. They shaped where villages formed, where fields survived, where people learned to wait. Water decided when crops would grow and when hunger would come. This dependence was understood deeply. People did not speak of nature as separate from themselves. Rain, sun, soil, wind. They were not background forces, they were participants. They listened, they reacted, they punished carelessness. Daily life unfolded inside this relationship. The land could be generous, and it could be unforgiving. Monsoon clouds gathered slowly on the horizon. Sometimes weeks passed before the first rain fell. When rain came on time, relief spread quietly through villages. When it failed, anxiety did not announce itself loudly. It settled into routine. Food was rationed earlier, offerings increased, conversations shortened. Fear did not stop work, it shaped it. Most people lived in villages, small clusters of homes made from mud brick, wood, or stone. Cities existed, but they belonged to a minority. For ordinary people, life was local, very local. Many never traveled beyond nearby fields or markets. The world was narrow, but it was known. Homes were modest and practical. Courtyards formed the center of daily activity. Grain was ground there, food was cooked there, children played there under watchful eyes. Shade mattered more than decoration. Ventilation mattered more than privacy. Heat shaped everything. Work began early, before the sun became punishing. Fields filled with quiet movement. Bare feet pressed into warm earth. Tools struck soil in steady rhythm. Labor was physical, repetitive. People did not expect variety. They expected continuity. Tasks were learned by watching. Children did not ask what they would become. They already knew. Birth shaped destiny. Family shaped duty. Caste shaped expectation. These divisions were not debated daily. They were absorbed early and lived with quietly. Choice was limited, but certainty existed. Religion did not interrupt life. It organized it. Fire burned in homes and courtyards, practical for cooking, sacred by meaning. Small rituals marked transitions: morning, meal, evening. They were not grand ceremonies. They were habits. A pinch of grain, a murmured phrase, a moment of stillness. Ritual reduced uncertainty. People believed order depended on correct action. A mistake in ritual could bring imbalance. Imbalance could invite illness, drought. misfortune. This belief created discipline without force. People followed rules because disorder was frightening, not abstractly, personally. Time moved differently. Days mattered more than years. Seasons mattered more than dates. The agricultural calendar ruled decisions. Festivals were pauses, rare interruptions that allowed rest, noise, release. But they were temporary. Routine always returned. Food was simple, repetitive. Rice, wheat, lentils, vegetables. Meals were eaten seated on the ground. Cleanliness mattered before eating, not after. Hunger was familiar, not always present, but never far. People did not eat to be full. They ate to continue. Social pressure enforced behavior quietly. Community judgment mattered. Privacy was limited. Everyone knew who worked hard. Everyone noticed who failed. Shame was powerful. Obedience was safer. This order was not gentle, but it was stable. Illness was common. Medicine existed, but it was inconsistent. Herbs, chants, treatments passed through generations. Some worked, many did not. Pain was accepted without complaint. Children died young. Adults expected loss. Grief was ritualized. Life did not pause for sorrow. Fields still needed tending. Water still needed carrying. Survival did not wait. As evening approached, the heat softened. Oil lamps appeared. Smoke drifted upward. Sounds changed. Day insects quieted. Night insects took their place. People gathered closer. Stories were told, not for entertainment alone, for memory. Oral tradition carried knowledge forward. Forgetting was dangerous. Remembering was duty. Night brought vulnerability. Darkness was thick. Lamps were weak. Animals moved freely. Insects filled the air. Sleep was light. Rest was cautious. Yet morning always returned. This was the pattern, not dramatic, not heroic, but persistent. Ancient India was not a single place or time, but across regions and generations, ordinary people shared this rhythm: work, ritual, heat, waiting, endurance. They did not seek change, they sought balance, and balance was fragile.
Most lives in ancient India unfolded inside villages, not as a choice, as a condition. Villages were not planned for beauty or expansion. They formed where water could be reached, where soil could be worked, where survival was possible year after year. Once settled, people stayed. Generations lived and died within the same boundaries, walking the same paths, touching the same walls. Change was rare. Repetition was normal. Homes clustered loosely around wells, fields, and courtyards. There were no clear borders between work and rest, between private and public. Life spilled outward. Conversations traveled easily. Sounds carried. Privacy, as a concept, barely existed. This closeness created safety and pressure. Everyone knew who belonged. Everyone knew who did not. Behavior was observed, quietly. A missed task, a broken rule, a delayed ritual. Nothing went unnoticed for long. Community held people together and held them in place. Fields surrounded villages like extensions of the body. Paths between homes and crops were worn smooth by feet. These routes were walked daily, sometimes multiple times a day, carrying water, carrying tools, carrying grain. The land demanded constant attention. Farming was repetitive by necessity. The same motions returned each season: sowing, waiting, weeding, harvesting. Failure was remembered longer than success. One good year did not erase the memory of a bad one. People learned caution early. Work began at dawn to avoid heat. Midday slowed movement. Shade became valuable. Bodies rested briefly, not comfortably. There was no long pause, just adjustment. Labor shaped posture. Backs bent early, hands hardened quickly. Children joined this rhythm without ceremony. They carried small loads, watched older hands, learned when to be silent, learned when to help. Education was not separate from work, it was embedded in it. No one asked what they wanted to do. They learned what needed to be done. Caste reinforced this repetition. Certain families worked certain tasks: pottery, weaving, farming, cleaning. These roles were inherited, not selected. Social boundaries were clear, rarely crossed. This order reduced conflict by removing uncertainty, but it also removed possibility. Ambition was dangerous. Standing out invited attention. Attention invited judgment. It was safer to fit perfectly into expectation. Villages enforced this without force. Shame was enough. Markets existed, but they were modest. Exchange was local. Most goods were made and used nearby. Long-distance trade passed through towns, not villages. For ordinary people in ancient India, life was materially simple. Few possessions, few options, few surprises. Religion lived inside this repetition. Small shrines stood near homes. Offerings were made quietly. Rituals marked beginnings and endings, not of lives, of days, of tasks, of meals. Fire, water, words. These acts were not emotional displays. They were maintenance. Ritual kept the world steady. Mistakes were feared. Forgetting a step, skipping an offering, disrespecting purity rules. These could bring imbalance. Imbalance explained misfortune, disease, crop failure, death. Belief gave meaning to uncertainty and pressure to conformity. Gender roles were firm. Women managed domestic life, food preparation, and often assisted in agriculture. Men worked fields, handled external tasks, and performed certain rituals. These divisions were not debated, they were assumed. Marriage happened early, families expanded, space tightened, courtyards filled with movement and noise. Elders watched, authority flowed downward. Family honor mattered more than comfort. Heat intensified everything. Dust settled into clothing, sweat was constant. Clothing was light, practical, repeatedly repaired. Bodies adapted, expectations adjusted. People rested when possible, but rest was never guaranteed. Illness spread easily in close quarters. Smoke from cooking fires filled lungs. Water quality varied. Children were vulnerable. Loss was common. Grief did not isolate. It was shared, then absorbed. Villages did not stop for mourning. Work continued. Survival required it. Ritual acknowledged death. Routine absorbed it. At dusk, fields emptied slowly. People returned home carrying tools, produce, fatigue. Lamps appeared. Shadows lengthened. Sounds softened. The village breathed together. Night brought a different kind of closeness. Stories were told, instructions repeated, warnings passed quietly. Children learned not only skills, but limits. The world beyond the village felt distant and dangerous. Most people never left their village for long. The idea of life elsewhere was abstract. Identity was local. Belonging was specific. This narrowness provided certainty. Life was predictable and confined. For ordinary people in ancient India, villages were everything: shelter, labor, judgment, support, limitation. They did not imagine another way. They lived inside repetition, and repetition carried them forward.
Homes in ancient India were not built for comfort. They were built for survival. Heat shaped every decision. Walls were thick, made from mud brick, stone, or wood packed with earth. These materials were not chosen for beauty. They were chosen because they slowed the sun. They held coolness for a few extra hours. That mattered. Most houses were small, 1 or 2 rooms at most. Furniture was minimal or absent. Space was used carefully. Every corner had a purpose. The courtyard was the heart of the home. Life happened there. Grain was ground on stone. Vegetables were cleaned. Children slept there during hot nights. Work and rest shared the same ground. Shade was more valuable than walls. Privacy was limited, but visibility was normal. Homes opened inward, not outward. Doors stayed open during the day. People moved freely between spaces. Smoke drifted from cooking fires. Voices carried. Nothing was fully hidden. This closeness reduced isolation and increased pressure. Cooking fires burned daily. Smoke filled rooms. Eyes stung. Lungs worked harder. Over time, this became normal. Coughing was common. Breathing problems were familiar. People did not connect smoke to illness. They accepted it as part of life. Floors were packed earth or stone, cool in the morning, warm by midday. Mats were rolled out for sitting and sleeping. At night, bodies rested close together, sharing warmth, sharing protection. Sleep was practical, not indulgent. Roofs were flat or lightly sloped. In some regions, people slept on rooftops when heat inside became unbearable. Night air offered brief relief. Stars felt close. Insects never left. Rain changed everything. During monsoon season, water transformed homes into shelters against chaos. Mud walls softened. Roofs leaked. Courtyards flooded. People repaired damage constantly. Homes were not permanent structures. They were maintained repeatedly. Repair was routine. Nothing was built to last untouched. Everything required attention. Cracks were filled. Roofs were patched. Walls were rebuilt when needed. This taught patience. Homes did not belong to individuals. They belonged to families and to time. Multiple generations lived together. Elders slept closest to walls, children near the center. Authority followed age. Instructions flowed downward. Silence was expected at certain times. Obedience learned early. Women spent much of their lives within these walls, managing food, cleaning, ritual preparation, teaching children. Their labor was constant, visible, and rarely acknowledged as separate work. Men moved more between home and field, but the house remained the anchor. No one escaped its rhythm. Heat slowed movement. Midday forced pause. People rested briefly, not deeply. Shade became refuge. Even conversation softened. Homes trained bodies to endure climate. Illness spread easily in close spaces. Fever moved from child to parent. Smoke worsened breathing. Water carried disease. Without modern sanitation, homes became both shelter and risk. This was understood, but unavoidable. When someone fell sick, care happened at home. Herbs were prepared, words were spoken, rituals performed. Recovery was uncertain. Death often occurred inside these walls, not hidden, not distant. Bodies were prepared by family. Ritual followed. Life adjusted. Space rearranged. Homes absorbed loss quietly. Religious practice lived here as well. Small altars, fire rituals, offerings placed carefully. These acts were not optional. They protected the household, or so people believed. Mistakes caused anxiety. Correctness brought calm. Homes were places of discipline. Rules governed behavior. Cleanliness before eating, separation during illness or ritual impurity, observance of caste boundaries even within shared spaces. Order mattered. This order was not imposed violently. It was inherited. Children learned where to sit, when to speak, how to move. The house taught them. At night, oil lamps glowed weakly. Shadows moved across walls. Insects filled the air. Sounds from nearby homes blended together. The village became one body. Homes did not isolate families, they connected them. This connection provided security and constant observation. For ordinary people, the home was not a refuge from society, it was society. Heat, smoke, ritual, family, illness, work, all met here. There was no escape, only adjustment. And so people adapted. They lived inside walls shaped by climate and belief. They learned to endure discomfort quietly. They accepted closeness. They trusted routine. The home did not promise comfort, it promised continuity.
Mourning in ancient India did not arrive gently, it arrived with necessity. Before the sun rose fully, movement began, not because people wanted to wake early, but because heat would soon make work impossible. The day had to be used carefully. There were no clocks, no alarms. The body learned time. Birds stirred, insects softened their sound. Smoke rose from the first cooking fires. Water was drawn, mats were rolled away. Sleep ended without ceremony. Mourning was not a personal moment, it was a collective signal. Work began immediately. Fields waited. Animals needed care. Grain had to be prepared. Tools were checked and reused, worn smooth by years of repetition. Every task was familiar and unavoidable. Most people were farmers. Their lives revolved around soil, rain, and sun. Fields were walked daily, not inspected from distance, touched, felt, judged by hand. The earth decided everything. If soil was too dry, anxiety followed. If clouds delayed, fear grew quietly. Morning labor focused on efficiency. Movements were learned early in life. Children watched, then copied. No explanations were needed. Mistakes were corrected silently. Skill came from repetition, not instruction. Heat shaped the rhythm. Work was hardest early. By midday, strength faded. Sweat soaked clothing. Shade became essential. Breaks were brief, functional, never indulgent. Rest was not freedom, it was preparation to continue. Men and women both worked. Roles differed, effort did not. Women carried water, ground grain, cooked, cleaned, cared for children, prepared ritual spaces. Their mourning never truly ended. Labor did not pause, it shifted form. Children participated early, carrying, fetching, cleaning, watching younger siblings. Childhood blended into responsibility. Play existed, but it was rare and brief. Work was not optional. It defined belonging. A person who did not work disrupted balance. Community judgment followed quickly. Idleness was not neutral. It was dangerous. Caste shaped obligation. Birth assigned duty. Some worked fields, others crafted goods, others performed ritual service. Choice was limited, very limited. Changing one's role meant breaking social order. That risk was too high for most people. Stability mattered more than ambition. Mourning reinforced this order. Everyone knew where they belonged and where they did not. Ritual framed the start of work. Small offerings, fire lit carefully, words spoken softly. These acts were not symbolic decoration, they were protection. Skipping ritual caused unease. If something went wrong later, injury, failed tool, illness, people searched backward. A missed offering, an incorrect word. Blame followed ritual mistakes, not chance. The sun rose higher, shadows shortened, heat pressed down. Work slowed but did not stop. Bodies adapted to discomfort. Suffering was normalized. Pain in joints, burns from cooking fires, cuts from tools, blisters from carrying loads. These were not treated as problems, they were signs of participation. Those unable to work felt shame. Illness threatened not only health, but social standing. Dependence was uncomfortable. Community helped, but watched. Obligation extended beyond family. Villages organized collective labor, irrigation channels, field maintenance, construction. Refusal was remembered,
quietly but permanently. Mourning work also supported authority. Priests depended on offerings, leaders depended on surplus. The social structure rested on ordinary labor. Most people never saw rulers, but they felt them through expectation, through obligation, through routine. There was little time to question why life was arranged this way. Survival left no space for abstract thought. Philosophy belonged to elites. For villagers, meaning lived in completion of tasks. As midday approached, work shifted closer to home. Shade was used, food prepared. Meals were simple, eaten seated on the ground. Cleanliness mattered, hands washed, rules followed. Food was shared, not personalized. Hunger was familiar. Even in good seasons, abundance was limited. People learned to eat without excess. Satisfaction was temporary. The morning's labor shaped the rest of the day. Success meant stability. Failure meant anxiety carried into sleep. There were no guarantees, only effort. Morning was not hopeful, it was necessary. Day after day, people arose because the system required it, because the family depended on it, because belief demanded it. This repetition built endurance and quiet exhaustion. The morning taught discipline and obedience, not through force, but through routine. And as the sun climbed higher, people did not look ahead to change. They looked down, to the ground, to the next task.
Food in ancient India was never just food. It was security, and fear, and ritual, and limitation. Every meal carried memory of the last failed harvest, and quiet worry about the next one. Most people ate what the land allowed, not what they desired. Diet depended on region, season, caste, and weather. Choice was rare. In the north, wheat and barley formed the base of daily meals. In the east and south, rice dominated bowls and rituals. Lentils followed everywhere, steady, reliable, offering protein where meat rarely appeared. Meals were repetitive, deliberately so. Repetition reduced risk. Familiar foods were safer. Experimentation was dangerous when resources were limited. Cooking began early, often while the air was still cool. Fires were lit with care. Fuel mattered. Dung, wood, dried plant matter, collected patiently. Smoke filled living spaces. It stung eyes, coated walls, settled into hair and cloth. But smoke also meant warmth and food and survival. Cooking took time. Grain had to be ground daily, stone against stone, a slow, exhausting motion, repeated thousands of times across a lifetime. Women performed this labor most often, their mornings shaped by weight and rhythm. Grinding was not symbolic, it was necessary. Hands hardened, shoulders ached, breathing shortened. Cooking happened close to the ground. Pots rested on simple hearths. Flames were unpredictable. Burns were common. Meals were eaten seated on packed earth floors or courtyard ground. Plates were simple, sometimes leaves, sometimes clay. Food was shared, rarely individual. Eating alone felt wrong, suspicious. Before meals, hands were washed. Ritual cleanliness mattered, not for comfort, for order. Eating improperly could invite imbalance. Purity rules guided who ate with whom and what. Caste influenced diet deeply. Some foods were restricted, some people were restricted. Sharing across boundaries could lead to social punishment. Food carried hierarchy. Meat consumption varied widely. Some communities ate fish, goat, or poultry when available. Others avoided meat entirely due to belief and ritual norms. But for most people, meat was rare. Protein came quietly, from lentils, from dairy, from occasional fish. Hunger was familiar, not constant starvation, but awareness. People knew what it meant to eat less, to stretch grain, to dilute meals, to skip portions so children could eat. Monsoon failure haunted every kitchen. Too much rain flooded fields. Too little burned them. Either could destroy a season. Storage was limited. Granaries existed. but most households held only short-term supplies. Preservation was basic: drying, storing in sealed containers, hoping pests stayed away. Sometimes they did not. Rats, insects, mold. Loss was common. When food ran low, tension rose, arguments sharpened. Fear became quiet but constant. People blamed themselves or the gods. Ritual increased during scarcity. Offerings became more frequent. Prayers grew more precise. Mistakes were feared. A wrong word, a missed step, a neglected fire. Everything was examined. Children learned early to accept hunger without complaint. Complaining brought shame. Endurance was praised. Eating was not pleasure, it was maintenance. Festivals broke routine briefly. Special foods appeared. Sweets, dairy-rich dishes, extra grain. These moments mattered deeply because they were rare. Memory carried them forward, sustaining patience. Alcohol existed, usually fermented drinks, but limited. Drunkenness disrupted order. It appeared mostly during ritual or celebration. Daily meals remained controlled, measured, predictable. Cooking preparation reinforced family roles. Women cooked, elders supervised, children assisted. Men ate with expectation of strength for labor. Gender shaped portions and timing. Health reflected diet. Dental wear was severe from stone-ground grain. Malnutrition weakened bodies quietly. Illness followed hunger closely. Herbal remedies existed, but could not replace food. When famine struck, villages changed. People migrated. Bonds strained. Some families disappeared from records entirely. Hunger erased quietly. There were no announcements, no dramatic collapse, just fewer voices, less smoke, empty courtyards. Food was never abundant enough to forget fear, and never scarce enough to stop hope. Every meal balanced between gratitude and anxiety, and as evening approached, cooking fires burned again. Smaller this time, meals simpler, portions measured. Night arrived with full stomachs for some, and hunger for others. But morning would come, and work would resume, and food would be sought again, not as comfort, but as continuation.
In ancient India, social order was not something people chose. It was something they were born into. Caste did not announce itself loudly. It did not need to. It lived quietly in daily decisions, in who spoke first, who stepped aside, who touched what, and who never could. From the moment of birth, a person's place was largely decided. Not only their work, but their behavior, their diet, their movement, their relationships, all shaped by this invisible structure. Caste was not discussed every day. It was lived. Most people accepted it not because it felt fair, but because it felt permanent. Questioning it brought confusion, fear, and punishment. Social more than physical. Community memory was long. People remembered who crossed boundaries and what happened afterward. Work followed caste lines: farming, craft, ritual service, manual labor. These roles were inherited, reinforced by expectation. Learning happened within the family. Skills passed quietly from parent to child. Ambition had limits, very clear ones. Trying to move beyond assigned duties invited suspicion. Harmony mattered more than individual ability. Order mattered more than talent. Daily interactions reflected this hierarchy. Eating together was restricted. Touch mattered. Distance mattered. Words mattered. Food rules reinforced caste boundaries. Some foods were considered polluting to others. Sharing meals could violate purity. Even water could carry restriction. Purity was not moral, it was social. Mistakes were costly. A single violation could result in exclusion, not dramatic expulsion, quiet withdrawal, fewer invitations, less cooperation, subtle isolation. Isolation was dangerous. Survival depended on community support. Losing it meant vulnerability during illness, during hunger, during conflict. Caste shaped movement, certain paths, certain wells, certain spaces, avoided by some groups, not always enforced by guards.
enforced by habit. People learned early where they belonged and where they did not. Women experienced caste pressure differently. Their behavior reflected not only family status, but ritual purity. Marriage reinforced caste lines. Early marriage was common. Choice was limited. Marriage was duty, not romance. Children absorbed caste norms before they understood them, watching adults, being corrected gently, learning silence. Questions faded quickly. Religious belief strengthened caste order. Ritual specialists held authority through knowledge of chants, fire rites, correct timing. Mistakes in ritual were feared. Fear preserved hierarchy. Caste was presented as cosmic order, part of Dharma, not imposed by people, but by the structure of the world itself. This belief made resistance feel dangerous, even immoral. Breaking caste rules risked spiritual consequences, not just social ones. For lower groups, life was constrained further. Certain work was unavoidable. Physical labor was heavier. Recognition was rare. Gratitude was limited. Their contribution was essential. Their status was not elevated. Pain was normalized. Hardship was expected. Complaining invited shame. Yet caste also created predictability. People knew what was expected. Roles were clear. Disputes were minimized by defined boundaries. Stability had value, even when it was unequal. Festivals temporarily softened lines. Food was shared more freely. Music crossed boundaries. But the return to normal was swift. Order reasserted itself. Caste shaped justice. Punishments varied by status. Authority protected itself. Lower groups bore consequences more heavily. Equality was not a goal. Continuity was. Despite its weight, caste was not constantly discussed. It was assumed, like gravity. Most people did not wake up angry about it. They woke up resigned. Life was too demanding to imagine alternatives. Fields needed tending. Children needed feeding. Rituals needed precision. Survival consumed attention. Occasionally, stories circulated of sages who transcended birth, of divine figures who challenged norms. These stories inspired reflection, not revolution. Hope existed, but carefully contained. The system endured because it was woven into every part of daily life. Removing it would unravel everything people depended on. For ordinary people, caste was not philosophy, it was routine, and routine was powerful. As evening approached, people returned to homes shaped by these rules. Meals followed them, sleep carried them forward. Children learned them again the next day. No announcement, no debate, just repetition. And in that repetition, the weight of caste remained, steady, unseen, and heavy.
In ancient India, the individual did not stand alone. Life began already connected. Family was not a choice, not an emotional preference. It was the basic structure through which existence made sense. To belong to a family meant protection, obligation, and identity at the same time. Outside of family, life was fragile. Most households were multi-generational. Grandparents, parents, children, sometimes distant relatives, living close together, often under the same roof or around the same courtyard. Space was shared. Privacy was minimal. This closeness created stability and pressure. Every action reflected on the family. Reputation mattered deeply. A mistake by one person could stain everyone. From early childhood, expectations were clear. Children learned not through formal instruction, but through observation. They watched adults work, speak, rest, perform rituals. Learning was quiet and constant. Boys were prepared for labor, responsibility, obedience. Girls were prepared for domestic work, ritual cleanliness, marriage. These paths were not debated, they were assumed. Marriage came early, especially for women. It was not primarily about companionship. It was about alliance,
duty, continuity. Families arranged unions carefully, guided by caste, reputation, local custom. Choice existed, but narrowly. A marriage strengthened networks between households. It secured labor. It reinforced social order. Personal desire ranked low. For women, marriage meant transition, leaving the family of birth, entering another household, adapting quickly. Silence was valued, compliance praised. Domestic labor defined daily rhythm: cooking, cleaning, water carrying, ritual preparation. These tasks filled the day. Work rarely ended. Rest came in fragments. Motherhood carried honor and risk. Childbirth was dangerous. Many women did not survive it. Those who did carried responsibility of lineage. Children were expected. Loss was common. Infant mortality was high. Families learned to grieve quietly. Rituals acknowledged death, but life moved on quickly. Survival demanded it. Fathers held authority, but elders, especially grandparents, shaped memory. They preserved stories, customs, ritual knowledge. They corrected mistakes. Respect for elders was not symbolic, it was enforced. Disobedience brought shame, not anger. Shame lingered longer. Family life balanced care and control. Support existed, but so did surveillance. Behavior was noticed. Deviations were discussed, quietly, firmly. Gender roles were strict. Men interacted more with the outside world, fields, markets, councils. Women anchored the household. Their labor sustained daily life. Their visibility was limited. Their impact was not. Children contributed early, fetching water, caring for siblings, assisting in fields or workshops. Childhood blended into duty. Play existed, but briefly. Education for most people was practical. Skills mattered more than knowledge. Reading sacred texts was reserved for certain groups. Memory replaced books. Stories taught values. Epics carried moral lessons. They were not entertainment alone. They reinforced obedience, sacrifice, duty. Family honor shaped behavior more than personal happiness. Decisions considered long-term impact. Individual desires were weighed against collective survival, often dismissed. Conflict existed within families: tension over resources, authority disputes, unequal treatment, but resolution aimed at preservation, not fairness. Breaking away was rare and risky. Those without family support struggled. Widows faced vulnerability. Orphans depended on community charity. Isolation threatened survival. Family absorbed shocks, protected against chaos. Religion reinforced family structure. Household rituals bound members together. Offerings were made not only for gods, but for ancestral well-being. Ancestors were present, watching, remembered. Marriage, birth, death, all were marked by ceremony. These rituals provided order in a fragile world. They gave meaning to loss, to transition. Life did not promise comfort, but it promised continuity. Family ensured that continuity, through discipline, through repetition, through sacrifice. And as night approached, families gathered close. Meals were shared, stories repeated, mats laid out together. Sleep came among others, not alone. In this closeness, people found both security and constraint. Family protected them from hunger and isolation, but demanded obedience in return. This was the exchange, and it held society together.
Craft in ancient India did not exist for beauty alone. It existed because survival required skill. Beyond the fields, beyond daily faring, there was another layer of life. Quieter, more focused, shaped by hands repeating the same movements for decades. Craftspeople lived inside routine just as deeply as farmers did, but their rhythm followed different sounds: the tap of clay, the scrape of fiber, the steady pull of thread. Craft was learned early. Children watched adults work long before they were allowed to try. Mistakes were corrected immediately. Materials were precious. Waste was dangerous. Skill was inherited, not chosen. Families specialized. Potters raised potters. Weavers raised weavers. Metalworkers trained their own. Knowledge moved through bloodlines, guarded carefully. Innovation was slow. Tradition mattered more. Tools were simple. Hands did most of the work. Clay was shaped slowly, dried under the sun, fired carefully. One mistake, too much heat, too little air, could ruin days of effort. Loss was common, accepted. Weaving dominated daily craft life. Cotton and plant fibers were spun by hand. Thread was made slowly, patiently. Women performed much of this labor, often alongside domestic duties. Weaving filled the quiet hours: morning, afternoon, evening. Cloth was essential. Clothing wore out quickly in heat, dust, and labor. Repair was constant. New garments were rare. Textiles carried identity: patterns, colors, fabric quality. They signaled region, caste, status. Clothing spoke quietly before words were exchanged. Pottery shaped daily survival: cooking vessels, storage jars, water containers. Everything depended on fired clay. A cracked pot meant food loss. Metalwork existed, but tools were limited. Bronze and early iron appeared gradually. Metal objects were valuable, reused endlessly. Nothing was thrown away casually. Trade connected villages and towns. Markets existed: modest, functional, social. Goods moved slowly. Barter dominated. Coins appeared later, unevenly. Trade was local, mostly. Long-distance trade existed, but few people participated directly. Most villagers experienced it indirectly through salt, beads, dyes, rare tools. Markets followed rhythm: weekly gatherings, seasonal exchanges. These moments broke routine briefly. Voices rose, news spread. Markets were not loud chaos. They were controlled, observed. Caste shaped craft as well. Certain crafts were respected, others were tolerated. Some were considered polluting. Craftspeople navigated this quietly. Payment was uncertain. Demand fluctuated. Bad harvests meant fewer buyers. Craft suffered first when food ran low. Hunger affected everyone. Craft labor was physically demanding. Sitting long hours damaged backs. Repetitive motion wore joints. Eyes strained in low light. Pain accumulated slowly, unremarked. Children joined early, helping prepare materials, cleaning tools, observing. Childhood shortened again. Craft offered stability, but not comfort. Those skilled were valued, but rarely elevated. Status remained fixed. Recognition did not change caste. Trade created connection and comparison. Seeing goods from elsewhere sparked curiosity and restraint. Desire was controlled. Excess was discouraged. Religion intersected with craft. Ritual objects required precision. Mistakes were dangerous. Sacred items demanded purity. Fear guided accuracy. Craft supported ritual economy. Offerings required containers. Cloth dressed images. Tools shaped altars. Without craftspeople, ritual stopped. Yet craftspeople remained invisible. Their labor filled daily life quietly. Pots broke. Cloth wore thin. New items appeared without ceremony. Work continued. As evening approached, craft slowed. Hands stiffened. Tools were stored carefully. Fires were checked. Dinner followed. Sleep followed. Craft did not promise wealth. It promised continuity. Skills kept families fed when fields failed. Trade created small buffers. Knowledge preserved relevance. But dependence remained. Craft bound people to repetition. Day after day, season after season, year after year. No applause, no records, just objects, used, worn, replaced.
And through these objects, life continued. Belief in ancient India did not live in temples alone. It lived in kitchens, in courtyards, in fields, in breath. Religion was not something people visited, it was something they carried. Every day began with awareness of unseen forces. The sun rising was not just light, it was presence. Fire was not just heat, it was sacred. Water was not just necessity, it was purifier. Nothing was neutral. Morning rituals were small but precise. A splash of water, a quiet gesture, a whispered sound. These acts did not feel dramatic, they felt necessary. Skipping them caused unease, not because punishment was immediate, but because imbalance was feared. Belief structured time. Work began after ritual, meals followed cleansing, sleep closed with quiet acknowledgement. Life unfolded inside ritual frames. Gods were not distant beings, they were part of daily thinking, present in illness, in harvest, in weather. When crops failed, belief explained why. When sickness arrived, belief interpreted cause. When children survived, belief gave thanks. Religion offered meaning, but also pressure. Ritual purity shaped behavior, who you could touch, who you could eat with, where you could walk, when you could rest. Mistakes mattered. A wrong gesture, a missed offering, a broken rule. These created anxiety. Fire rituals were central. Fire burned daily, for cooking, for warmth, for ceremony. The same flame that prepared food also carried offerings. Fire connected worlds. Household altars were common, small, unadorned, stones, ash, simple objects. They were not showpieces, they were functional, sacred points. Belief did not require grand architecture to exist, it required discipline. Priests held influence, but belief did not depend on them alone. Families maintained their own rituals. Elders corrected younger members. Memory mattered. There was no written checklist. Rituals were remembered, repeated, passed orally. Forgetting was dangerous. Children learned early, watching adults, copying movements, absorbing fear quietly. Belief also shaped morality. Karma framed actions. Good behavior promised balance, not reward. Bad behavior risked future suffering, not always immediate. This made control internal. People watched themselves. Religion reinforced social order. Caste roles were explained through belief. Duty was justified as cosmic necessity. Questioning was rare. Belief offered comfort during loss. Death was not final disappearance. It was transition. Rituals softened grief, but belief also normalized suffering. Pain was interpreted as consequence, illness as imbalance, poverty as fate. This reduced rebellion and increased endurance. Festivals interrupted routine briefly. Sound, color, release. Food was shared more freely. Work paused. But festivals were temporary. Routine always returned. Fear was part of belief. Spirits, forces, bad omens. Night carried threat. Disease carried meaning beyond biology. Religion filled gaps where knowledge ended. Not all belief was gentle. Animal sacrifice occurred. Ritual precision mattered. Errors caused fear of disaster. The weight of belief pressed constantly, softly but persistently. Belief guided choices silently. When to plant, when to marry, when to travel, when to wait. Nothing happened without interpretation. Even silence had meaning. As evening approached, belief shifted tone. Lamps were lit, shadows deepened, sounds changed. Night rituals closed the day. Gratitude, protection, completion. Sleep followed belief, not as rest, but as pause. Belief did not promise happiness. It promised order. It gave people a framework to endure heat, hunger, loss, repetition. Without belief, life felt exposed. With belief, life felt constrained, but explained. Faith filled the space between effort and outcome, and in that space, people lived.
Ritual in ancient India was not an occasional event. It was constant.
It shaped how people woke, how they moved, how they worked, how they ate, how they rested. Purity and impurity were not abstract ideas. They were daily concerns. They followed every person from morning until night. Nothing was neutral. Water could cleanse, fire could purify, ash could protect, but a single mistake could undo everything. Purity rules governed ordinary actions. Who could cook? Who could serve food? Who could touch a vessel? Who could enter a space? These rules were learned early and enforced quietly. No guards were needed. Community memory was enough. A wrong action did not always bring immediate punishment. Instead, it brought fear, fear of imbalance, fear that something unseen had been disturbed. This fear stayed with people. Rituals were precise. Words mattered. Timing mattered. Sequence mattered. Fire rituals required correct gestures, correct sounds. Errors were believed to anger forces that controlled rain, harvest, health, fertility. Mistakes felt dangerous, not symbolically, but practically. If drought followed a ritual error, the cause felt obvious. If sickness appeared, the reason seemed clear. Ritual purity became a way to explain suffering. This explanation brought comfort, but also pressure. People monitored themselves constantly. Before eating, washing was required. Before prayer, silence. Before sleep, acknowledgement. Even rest had rules. Purity was also social. Some people were considered permanently less pure. Birth defined this status. Contact with certain groups required cleansing afterward. This created distance, not always through cruelty, but through habit. Children learned these boundaries early. They watched adults hesitate, step back, wash again, speak softly around certain people. No one needed to explain hierarchy. It was visible. Rituals structured fear. Disease was not random. It was imbalance. Misfortune was not chance. It was consequence. This worldview reduced uncertainty but increased self-blame. When crops failed, families questioned their actions. When children fell ill, mothers replayed rituals in memory. When storms arrived, elders searched for mistakes. Religion gave meaning, but it also created quiet guilt. Animal sacrifice was part of ritual life, not daily, but present. These acts were not spectacles. They were controlled, solemn, justified as necessary exchange. Life was offered to preserve balance. Fear of divine displeasure supported obedience. Ritual specialists held authority through knowledge. Ordinary people depended on correct guidance. Questioning was rare. Ritual also reinforced caste boundaries. Certain rituals were restricted. Certain sounds, certain words, certain actions were forbidden to some groups. Breaking these rules risked social punishment. Exile did not require force. Shame was enough. Purity rules extended into death. Corpses were dangerous. Contact required cleansing. Grief was ritualized to prevent spiritual contamination. Even mourning followed structure. At night, fear intensified. Darkness removed visual certainty. Oil lamps flickered. Sounds carried. Belief filled gaps left by sight. Spirits were thought to move freely after sunset. Ritual protections mattered more at night. Sleep was cautious. Dreams were interpreted. Nightmares were signs. Ritual fear was not constant panic. It was low, steady, like heat, like humidity, always present. Religion did not ask people to feel joy. It asked them to behave correctly. This correctness gave life stability, predictability, continuity, but it limited freedom. Deviation risked imbalance. Balance mattered more than expression. Ritual did not evolve quickly. Innovation was dangerous. Change required justification through tradition.
This preserved order and preserved fear. Yet people endured within this system. They found comfort in repetition, in known gestures, in familiar words. Fear and faith existed together. Ritual created a world where suffering had explanation, where obedience felt meaningful, where endurance became virtue. Life was not about questioning, it was about maintaining balance long enough to survive. And when rituals were completed correctly, when lamps burned steadily, when silence settled after prayer, people felt momentary relief, not happiness, relief, a sense that for now the world was still aligned.
In ancient India, knowledge did not live on paper, it lived in people. There were no notebooks on village floors, no written instructions pinned to walls. What needed to be known was carried in memory, repeated aloud, corrected in real time. Learning was not optional, it was survival. Children learned by watching. From the moment they could walk, they absorbed movements, sequences, tones of voice. No one explained concepts in abstract terms. Skills were shown, repeated, corrected silently. Memory mattered more than creativity. Stories were the primary vessel of knowledge. Long narratives passed from elders to youth. They explained lineage, duty, ritual order, consequence. Forgetting was dangerous. A missed step in ritual, a wrong word in recitation, a broken sequence. These were not small errors. They risked imbalance. Sacred texts existed, but not as books for ordinary people. The Vedas were spoken, not read, memorized through years of repetition, passed mouth to ear. Only certain groups had access to this knowledge. Others listened. Knowledge became power through exclusivity. This created hierarchy. Those who remembered correctly held authority. Those who forgot relied on them. Education was uneven. Boys from certain families learned chants, rituals, calculations. Others learned only what their labor required. Girls learned household skills, rituals of purity, songs, rules of behavior. Their education was constant, but narrow. Learning reinforced roles. Curiosity was controlled. Questions were allowed only within limits. Asking why was less important than knowing how. Innovation carried risk. Tradition offered safety. This system preserved continuity across generations. Practices remained stable for centuries. Fields were worked the same way. Rituals repeated the same sounds. But the cost was pressure. Mental load was heavy. Elders held vast stores of memory. Forgetting with age caused fear, not only personal but communal. Who would remember next year's ritual? Who would recall correct offerings? Who would guide the young? Mistakes were not private, they were visible. Correction came publicly, not harshly but firmly. Silence followed error. Shame did its work. Learning without writing also meant loss was permanent. When someone died, knowledge could vanish with them. No record remained. This made elders invaluable and vulnerable. Children learned fear alongside information, fear of forgetting, fear of misremembering, fear of causing harm through error. This shaped discipline. Songs helped memory. Rhythm made repetition easier. Chants anchored words in sound. Learning happened daily, quietly. At night, stories were told again, the same ones. The repetition was the lesson. There was comfort in familiarity, but also confinement. new ideas struggled to survive. Oral systems rewarded precision, not imagination. Belief reinforced this. Sacred sound was considered powerful. Changing words risked spiritual damage. Accuracy mattered more than insight. Memory became duty. For most people, learning stopped early. What was needed was known. Additional knowledge was unnecessary, even dangerous. This created stability and stagnation. Yet the system worked. Communities remembered enough to survive. Crops were planted, rituals completed, roles maintained. Life continued. Learning was communal. One person's memory supported many, but one person's failure could harm all. This pressure bonded communities tightly. It also limited individuality. Education did not aim to expand the mind. It aimed to preserve order, and order mattered more than progress. In this world, knowing your place was knowledge, knowing when to speak, wisdom, knowing what not to change, safety. As night approached, elders repeated stories once more. Children listened, half awake. The same words settled again into memory. Tomorrow they would be needed.
Illness in ancient India was not rare. It was expected. Pain arrived quietly and stayed. Fevers came with the monsoon. Infections followed small wounds. Smoke from cooking fires settled into lungs year after year. Health was fragile. There were no clear boundaries between sickness and normal life. People worked while unwell. Rest was brief. Pain was tolerated rather than treated. Healing existed, but it was limited. Herbs were gathered. Pastes were applied. Teas were prepared from roots, leaves, and bark. Some helped. Many did nothing. Some caused harm. There was no certainty. Ayurvedic knowledge existed, but for most people it was distant. Texts belonged to elites. Practical healing in villages relied on memory, observation, belief. Illness was rarely seen as random. A fever was imbalance. A wound that worsened was consequence. A child's sickness was interpreted through ritual memory. People searched for cause in behavior. Did someone skip a ritual? Was purity broken? Was a rule ignored? Healing combined care and fear. Family members tended the sick closely. Water was brought, food was softened, lamps burned near sleeping mats at night. But fear lingered. Illness spread easily. Crowded homes, shared water, limited sanitation. Parasites were common. Skin infections lingered. Dental pain was frequent due to coarse grains. Respiratory problems followed years of indoor smoke. Women faced particular risks. Childbirth was dangerous. Complications were common. Many women did not survive delivery. Children were vulnerable. Fevers took them quickly. Small ailments became fatal. Grief was familiar. Families lost members regularly. Death did not shock. It interrupted routine briefly. Rituals followed. Bodies were prepared carefully. Cleansing was required. Contact with death was considered dangerous. Mourning followed structure to restore balance. Healing rituals addressed both body and unseen forces. Chants accompanied herbs. Offerings accompanied care. This brought comfort, but it also delayed practical response. Some illnesses were accepted as fate. Pain became normalized. People endured sickness quietly. Complaining offered little benefit. Strength was admired. Endurance respected. Those who survived gained status. Those who did not were mourned, then replaced in routine. Community support existed, but resources were limited. Families relied on each other. When many fell ill, help thinned. Epidemics struck hard. Monsoon seasons brought waves of sickness. Entire households weakened simultaneously. There was no isolation. Care became shared suffering. Belief helped explain loss. Karma framed outcomes. Past actions justified present pain. This reduced anger and reduced resistance. Healing also reinforced social order. Certain healers held authority. Others were excluded. Access depended on status. Lower castes received less care. Discrimination extended into illness. Some were blamed for disease rather than helped. Fear of contamination created distance. Illness revealed inequality clearly. Pain shaped daily rhythm. Work slowed, but did not stop. Fields still required tending. Animals still needed care. Rest was negotiated. Healing was not about cure. It was about returning to function. Survival mattered more than comfort. Night intensified illness. Fever worsened. Lamps flickered. Sounds felt closer. Families watched breathing carefully. Sleep was interrupted. Morning brought assessment. Who could stand? Who could work? Who would be left behind? Healing did not promise recovery. It promised attempt. People lived knowing that health could collapse suddenly. This awareness shaped humility. Plans remained short. The future was uncertain. Yet life continued. Children grew. Elders aged. Work repeated. Healing existed in small victories. A fever breaking. A wound closing. A child surviving another season. These moments mattered. They reinforced belief. Illness reminded people of fragility, of dependence, of limits. And within those limits, people endured.
Conflict in ancient India was not always visible. It did not arrive every day with weapons or fire, but it was always possible. Villages lived with quiet awareness that safety was temporary. Beyond fields and rivers lay uncertainty. Borders shifted, power changed hands. Raids happened without warning. Life felt stable until it wasn't. Most ordinary people were not warriors. They were farmers, potters, herders, weavers. Their lives depended on routine. Conflict disrupted that routine instantly. A raid could destroy a season of work. Crops burned, animals taken, homes damaged. Recovery took years, sometimes generations. War was not constant, but insecurity was. Men could be called away. Conscription happened when rulers demanded it. Villagers lost laborers at critical times. Planting, harvest, fields waited. Families adapted. Women took on heavier burdens. Elders worked beyond strength. Loss reshaped households quietly. Conflict also arrived through taxation and obligation. States demanded resources, grain, labor, goods. Refusal was dangerous. Power rarely asked politely. Villages complied to avoid punishment. This compliance drained reserves. Hunger followed conflict more often than violence itself. Refugees existed. Families displaced by drought or war moved toward rivers or safer regions. They arrived with little. Integration was uncertain. Strangers were viewed cautiously. Resources were limited. Trust took time. Loss did not always involve death. Sometimes it was separation. Sons leaving for war, daughters married away, families fractured slowly. Communication was slow. Months passed without news. Absence became normal. Grief adapted. Belief explained loss. Karma justified suffering. Duty reframed sacrifice as necessary. This softened pain and normalized endurance. Weapons were simple: spears, bows, blades. Conflict was close and personal. Fear spread faster than armies. Villages listened for signs: distant smoke, strange sounds, sudden silence. Night intensified fear. Lamps dimmed, doors closed early. Sleep became lighter. Children sensed tension. Adults spoke less. Defense was communal. Villages relied on numbers, not walls. Cooperation mattered. Isolation increased vulnerability. Loss followed conflict in waves. After violence came disease. After displacement came hunger. Recovery was slow. Some losses were never repaired. Memory preserved these events. Stories warned future generations. Lessons were repeated orally. Fear became inherited. Children learned caution early: where not to go, when to return, whom to trust. Conflict shaped boundaries. Social hierarchy influenced survival. Higher status families recovered faster. Lower status families suffered longer. Inequality widened after conflict. Those with connections rebuilt first. Those without endured quietly. Belief offered explanation, but not protection. Rituals continued during conflict. Offerings were made for safety. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. When protection failed, faith was questioned briefly, then reinforced. Blame shifted inward. Perhaps the ritual was wrong. Perhaps purity was broken. Conflict did not end belief. It strengthened it. Loss became routine. Mourning rituals repeated. Life resumed. The fields demanded attention. Children needed feeding. Conflict passed, but insecurity remained. This awareness shaped restraint. People planned cautiously, stored what they could, avoided risk. Ambition was dangerous. Stability mattered more than expansion. Most people lived their lives without seeing large battles, but their lives were shaped by the possibility. Conflict existed at the edges of routine, always waiting. And when it arrived, it took more than lives. It took certainty. Yet people endured. They rebuilt. They adapted. They continued. Because survival depended on continuing, even after loss.
Night in ancient India arrived quickly. The sun fell, and with it went certainty. Heat lingered in walls and earth, but light faded fast. Shadows deepened. Familiar spaces changed shape. Darkness mattered. Oil lamps were lit carefully. Their glow was weak and uneven. Flames flickered in courtyards and rooms, barely pushing back the night. Beyond the circle of light, everything felt closer and more threatening. Night was not a time of activity. It was a time of caution. Most work ended at dusk. Fields were abandoned. Tools were set aside. Animals settled near homes. Movement slowed. Silence grew. Sounds carried farther at night. Footsteps echoed. Insects filled the air. Dogs barked at unseen movement. Wind moved through trees and roofs. People listened more than they spoke. Night brought vulnerability. Without light, danger felt nearer. Snakes, insects, animals, all moved freely after dark. Illness worsened after sunset. Fevers rose. Breathing became heavier. Sleep was light. People slept on mats or cloths laid on packed earth or stone floors. Bodies stayed clothed. Blankets were thin. Heat lingered, but humidity pressed down. Rest was partial. Families slept close together. Proximity offered comfort and safety. Children stayed near elders. Separation felt risky. Night rituals marked transition. Lamps were lit with intention. Small offerings were made. Quiet words acknowledged unseen forces. These rituals did not guarantee protection. They reduced fear. Belief intensified at night. Spirits were thought to move freely after dark. The boundary between worlds felt thinner. Dreams mattered. Nightmares carried meaning. Bad dreams were discussed at dawn, interpreted, explained. Sleep was not escape. It was another space of interpretation. Travel at night was avoided unless necessary. Darkness hid threats. Roads were unsafe. Encounters unpredictable. Those who moved at night did so quietly. Fear shaped behavior. Illness felt heavier in the dark. Pain sharpened. Families watched the sick closely. Lamps burned longer near those who struggled to breathe. Night turned care into vigil. Death often came quietly at night. A breath stopped. A body stilled. Silence followed.
Morning rituals prepared for this possibility. Night did not belong to rest alone, it belonged to waiting. Animals sensed night differently. Livestock shifted, dogs guarded. Their reactions alerted households. Every sound carried meaning. Fear was not panic, it was steady. Night also stripped away distractions. Without work, without light, thoughts surfaced. Loss returned. Anxiety grew. Belief filled the space. Chance soothed. Familiar words calmed breathing. Repetition eased tension. Sleep came in fragments. Before dawn, sometimes cold crept in. Bodies shifted. Fires were fed sparingly. Fuel was precious. Waiting for sunrise became routine. Night revealed inequality. Some homes had more lamps, more fuel, better protection. Others sat in deeper darkness. Those without resources endured longer nights. Children learned fear early. Night taught restraint, silence, stillness. Fear became normal. Yet night also offered moments of closeness. Family spoke quietly. Stories were told softly. These moments felt protected by darkness. Intimacy existed, but always within caution. Night reinforced limits. It reminded people of vulnerability, of dependence on light, warmth, community. Dawn was relief. As the sky lightened, tension eased. Birds returned. Shapes became clear. Routine resumed. Night ended, but memory remained. Fear carried into the day. People adjusted behavior, avoided risks, repeated rituals carefully. Night trained endurance. It taught patience. It taught humility. And it reminded everyone that safety was temporary.
In ancient India, life was not measured by happiness. It was measured by continuation. A good life was not one without pain, fear, or limitation. A good life was one that did not break the chain. People did not ask whether life was fair. They asked whether it would continue. Fields had to be planted again. Rituals had to be performed again. Children had to learn the same duties their parents once learned. Comfort was secondary. Stability mattered more. Most people lived their entire lives inside repetition. The same paths, the same rivers, the same prayers spoken in the same order. Change was not the goal, survival was. Generations passed knowledge, not to improve life, but to keep it from collapsing. Every gesture, every rule, every restriction existed for that reason. Caste fixed roles early, not because society imagined it was kind, but because predictability reduced chaos. You did what you were born to do. You did it the way it had always been done, and you hoped the gods would allow the cycle to continue. Freedom was not absent by accident, it was traded deliberately. Religion softened that trade. Belief offered meaning where choice was limited. Ritual gave structure to suffering. If pain had purpose, it could be endured. If duty pleased the gods, it could be justified. If karma explained injustice, it became bearable. Most people did not read sacred texts. They lived them, in the rhythm of work, in rules of purity, in fear of error. Life demanded attention, not ambition. Children learned this early. They copied adults. They absorbed rules before questioning was possible. By the time understanding arrived, habit was already stronger. Endurance became virtue. Women carried continuity through food, ritual, and birth. Men carried it through labor, protection, and obligation. Both carried exhaustion.
Loss was common. Disease, famine, war, heat, flood. People grieved, but quietly. Life did not stop for grief. Fields still needed work. Rituals still required precision. Children still needed guidance. The system did not pause. That was its strength and its cost. Over centuries, this way of life persisted, not because it was gentle, but because it adapted slowly without breaking. Civilizations rose and fell. Texts changed. Rulers came and went, but the village routine remained. Morning work, midday heat, evening ritual, night vigilance. The ordinary person carried history forward without knowing it. They were not remembered by name. They left no monuments, but without them, nothing endured. Ancient India did not survive because life was easy. It survived because people accepted limits. They lived inside boundaries. They repeated actions faithfully. They feared mistakes more than hardship. And through that discipline, through that quiet submission to continuity, life persisted. Not beautifully, not comfortably, but steadily. And that was enough. As night returns again, oil lamps flicker, voices soften, bodies rest where they can. Another day ends without transformation. And that is success, because tomorrow the river will still flow, the fields will still wait, and life will continue, not through comfort, but through endurance. Now the lamps grow dim, the sounds of the village soften, breathing slows. Nothing more is required tonight. The world you've stepped into does not rush. It does not demand attention. It simply continues. You may rest now. Let the repetition fade into quiet. Let the past loosen its grip. Thank you for spending this time with us. If these journeys bring you calm, you're always welcome to return. For now, good night.